Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graben. We're joined today by Ash Taylor. He's our first guest coming to us from England, so I'm very excited and happy about that. Ash is, among other things, the founder of the Business Clubhouse. He is the speaker, a speaker and a business coach supporting small business owners. And he has also authored a book that is going to print soon and will be available in early December called Hitting the Wall. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. So Ash, how are you? Thank you for joining us here today.
I'm really good. I don't know whether to say good morning or good evening as we are here. I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me on.
Morning for me, early evening for you. It's probably already dark.
Very dark.
Very
dark for a couple of hours.
We're in that time of year. So Ash, as you were getting ready for the podcast here and thinking about this, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
Wow, Mark, I guess you've probably heard something along these lines from many of your guests, and there are, life is one big mistake after another, and I seem to have run the gamut. So yeah, it was a great question. It really intrigued me. It got me thinking. I've had discussions with my wife. I've had discussions with my team, and there's kind of for me, it was very much one mistake inside of another mistake, if you like. So my favorite mistake is based around my old business. So we ran quite a significant tennis coaching business, a couple of thousand kids that we were working with across multiple venues. And the thing that really resonated with me with this is the mistake I made was working with clients who we were not suited for. So we were very much a startup business. We accelerated very, very quickly. And part of that was because our marketing was so successful. And we ended up taking on clients that on reflection, and quite quickly on reflection, we realized that they were the wrong sort of people for us. We were not best placed to serve them. And it led to a number of challenges, one of which was a big mistake, but not my favorite, which was losing the business, that business. But it's also something that has stuck with me. So yeah, that was the thing that really kind of jumped out at me, was that whole understanding of who your client is, and that not everybody is suited to working with you. And I think a lot of people make that mistake, and I see it all the time now.
Yeah.
Even as we go along. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to hear more about that. I mean, what are the different profiles of clients who are looking for tennis coaching? What was that profile that was not a good fit? How did you learn that?
So we specifically with clients, it was less the players and more the clubs that we were working with, the venues that we were working with. So a perfect club for us would have between 4 and 6 courts. They would have at least 2 floodlit courts. They would be near a reasonable sized town. Didn't have to be huge, but there needed to be at least 4 schools. So you could generate enough custom for that club. And we realized very quickly, because we were having quite an impact quite quickly, we were getting people to approach us because of the marketing. And we ended up saying to clubs that were sort of 2 courts, no floodlits, tiny village, not enough of a catchment, the wrong sort of demographic, and going, oh yeah, we can help you, that's not a problem. And then you're really struggling to kind of get your model to work for these clients. Things go wrong quite quickly. And suddenly you're in a position where you're thinking, well, this should work. It's a tennis club. It's got tennis courts, and people want tennis coaching, and we're doing everything that's worked in all these other clubs, but why isn't it working? And it's only when you kind of really drill down and you recognize that actually we've got really good at what we're doing because we've isolated a problem within a certain niche and a certain environment, and we're able to solve that problem. And that doesn't always translate within the same industry, because there's niches within niches, I guess.
Yeah. And so was your business model, or was the service that you would come in to a club and you would be the on-site coaches if they were not already providing that service?
Yeah. So typically those clubs, there was stuck between not being quite big enough or being in demographic area that allowed them to appoint a full-time coach to serve that club. So they were kind of stuck in between. So they'd end up with like a rolling team of part-timers who were a bit unreliable. So we would come in, we would appoint a coach who would work across that venue and another venue geographically nearby, giving the coach full-time work and the clubs the amount of fulfillment that they needed for their demographic, for their catchment area. So when it worked, it was a really, really good model, really good model. But yeah, when you don't have floodlights, you don't have a clubhouse, and nobody would come. Yeah. They made it very, very difficult. So yeah, interesting learning.
So I'm sorry that business didn't work out, but it sounds like there are lessons that you've carried forward through your own work and business now and serving as a business coach. As you work with people today, do you have a process for going through and trying to determine upfront if a business is that right fit, that they're suited for your coaching, for the business clubhouse? How do you do that today?
Well, it's interesting because I said at the beginning that there was a mistake within a mistake. And I think, I know that, I started coaching business owners rather than tennis players probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And I found myself sitting with a client about 5 years ago. And sort of there was just this kind of lack of energy, and I'm sitting there going, there's something weird about this, I don't quite get it. And it suddenly just sprung on me, I've got the wrong client.
Yeah.
and I think the kind of overall learning there was, although I'd made that mistake in my old business and I'd recognized it for what it was, I'd assumed that the tennis coaching business was unrelatable to what I was doing now. And that in itself was a big mistake, because I spent a long time trying to create this new model into new structure. And where the business clubhouse works really well is I've just actually taken my tennis coaching experience and the model and everything that we used and ported it across. The only difference is that we don't have to run at the same time as learning and being challenged and being educated, if you like. So I think that was the kind of the real favorite bit, was that moment where you just think, oh my God, I've done this before and I'm doing it again. Mm-hmm. And I'd made this assumption that what I did in my old business was so unrelated to what I'm doing now, whereas actually it was a perfect fit. And Mark, you mentioned the book, and it's that moment made me realize that actually that was the book that I needed to write. Mm-hmm. Was the lessons learned in my coaching career as a tennis player. And as running that tennis business, because they were all so relatable to business as well. It sounds like big learning.
Well, so it sounds like when you had that new business, that recognition came more quickly. Maybe I think back to I used to play tennis growing up. Like you get better at recognizing one of your opponent's particular serves as a match goes on. Okay, he's gonna hit really wide, and you start to pick that up where it may have really surprised you in the first, and you learn and adjust. It seems like there's maybe a parallel there of starting to see that situation more quickly, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I think you if you're awake to it, and I think this is one of the challenges that we come across all the time is, people make mistakes and they don't ever sit down and kind of dissect what caused that mistake and how can they learn lessons to identify if they're going to make that mistake again. So I'll give you a perfect example. I wrote a blog about it a couple of years ago. My wife went out for dinner with a very, very close friend. They'd made a booking at a reasonably high-end restaurant in London. They turned up and there's a notice on the door saying closed for private party. So Russell, her friend, who's insolvency practitioner, used to dealing with difficult people, knocks on the door, walks through the door. As he walks through, there's a waitress behind the bar, and she says, "Oh, Mr. Payne," and he's like, "Yes." "Take a seat, have a glass of champagne." And she comes over and explains that they'd had somebody new start. They didn't understand the booking system. They'd made a mistake. But if they just could wait for 2 or 3 minutes while they finished their champagne, there was a taxi on its way to pick them up, to take them to the sister restaurant.
Oh, wow.
They turned up at the sister restaurant with a private booth available, a full bottle of champagne on the house.
Wow.
Now, the thing that I find fascinating about that is somebody in that organization has sat down with a team and asked the question, what do we do when we make a mistake? Mm-hmm. Not if, but when.
Right.
And when we make that mistake, what contingency are we going to put in place to make sure that people still leave our business happy?
Yeah.
And here I am telling that story.
That's a fantastic story when you talk about service recovery and turning what could have been a really bad, frustrating situation into something that they rave about. And look, you're demonstrating how good stories about a business tend to get passed along that way. And it's, I think that's a really interesting point of planning for what to do when we make a mistake. I think sometimes pride gets in the way, and we'll say, well, no, we're not going to make mistakes, so let's not waste time planning for that. And that could trip up an organization, whether it's a restaurant or the realm I work in quite often, hospitals. Like as an engineer, part of my training is to think about what could go wrong. And sometimes in other fields, there's not that same comfort level where it almost sounds like superstition, where somebody might say, well, if we, as if we don't talk about the risk, or if we do talk about the risk, that somehow makes it more likely to happen. I'm like, well,
yeah, no. It's like the universal hearers and and fill in the gap. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a great book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed, and he talks about the difference between the medical industry and the airline industry, and how the whole airline industry is set up to dissect every flight, every mistake, every error, so that they're building this bank of experience based on real life errors. Whereas there's a bit of a hierarchical culture in the medical industry where you can't highlight mistakes. There's a fear factor built in, and the two comparable industries are huge, and it's a shame that one. And there are some hospitals that are learning from the airline industry and changing things, and their incidences have gone through the floor.
Right.
Because of that learning. So those mistakes in that context, I think, are really powerful and very, very important.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely look that book up. You said it was Black Box Thinking.
Yeah, great book. Good read. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's and one of the lessons I think from aviation, or what's sometimes called high reliability organizations, is that we respond not just when harm occurs, but we get better at responding when there's a near miss, or we, better yet, are more proactive about identifying risk factors. Yeah.
I mean, you asked me earlier about what we do with the businesses that we work with, and about learning from mistakes, and it's that there. It's one, identifying the risk, but two, when you've identified the risk, making sure you're putting process in place to minimize the impact of that risk. And I find it quite frustrating sometimes that people almost think that mistakes are one-off things.
Right.
And that then once I've made them, they're never going to happen again. So running out of cash is a perfect example. Well, okay, I've run out of cash now. That's a mistake I've made. I'm never going to run out of cash again. And then they worry why 6 months later they've run out of cash again.
Yeah.
Because they haven't implemented any change in their processes or credit process or anything like that to make sure that doesn't happen again. And they haven't put any alerts in place, for lack of another term, to let them know that they might be going down that path. They just sort of keep running the way that they've run, going, well, I've learned from that, it's not a problem. But unless you change the organization, the whole organization, to change it, to be aware of it, nothing changes.
Yeah. And I think of, my roots originally were in the automotive industry as an engineer. And when there's a problem, the word containment gets used a lot in the auto industry. So thinking back to that restaurant story, that brilliant story that you told, the initial containment was the glass of champagne and the taxi cab and, being treated like royalty the rest of the evening. But then there's that important next step, as you were saying, how do we follow up and make sure the next time we have a new employee that our training is better so that they understand the booking system, and we don't have to continually, monthly or quarterly or every time we have a new employee, whoops, here was that mistake, pull out the champagne plan. That longer term response. Some organizations are very good at containment, but they end up solving, quote unquote, containing the same problem over and over again. It seems like you've learned this lesson as well about having to go back to more of, if you will, the root cause of the situation.
Yeah, it's all about whether you're being curative, I guess, or preventative. And sometimes, as you say, the containment, the cure needs to be put in place. But in an ideal world, that bottle of champagne will stay behind the counter forever because they'll never need it. Because it's the steps. Yeah, totally. And it's asking. I think it's asking why often enough in reverse. So why was the booking made? Well, because we had a new member of staff. Or why did the member of staff not know about that system? And you keep asking those questions. In reverse engineer it, you'd understand that, obviously. And that's how you get to the core reason, fundamentally.
Yeah. So I'd like to learn more about the business Clubhouse and why you started the organization, and why do small businesses come to the business Clubhouse? What are they looking for? What are they getting in terms of coaching and support?
Okay, well, I guess, and it kind of goes back to the mistakes of not pulling my model learnings from my old business into my new one. When I started business coaching, I did the typical thing of going out and looking for one-to-one clients, and I did that, and I was able to have an impact, and it was kind of a mixture of coaching and consulting. And then I realized quite quickly that I wasn't having a big enough impact. And my joy in the tennis world was not working with elite players, but working with 5-year-olds who'd never hit a ball before, or working with disabled players who could not walk and were wheelchair bound, but were able to play tennis.
Oh, wow.
I'd spent quite a lot of time working in a deaf school, for example, and I wanted to find a model that would enable more people to access coaching, more people to access support, more people to be able to lean on my experience and my mistakes and the mistakes of the other people as well. And you go back to the kids that I used to teach, the kids that kind of accelerated their learning did so in a peer group environment. So when you put kids in groups, they get competitive, they learn off each other, they try stuff, they're not intimidated by somebody who's bigger and heavier and stronger and more experienced. It's kind of, they're pushing each other along in 1% increments, if you like. And I realized less quickly than I'd like that there was an opportunity to kind of create something in the business world as well. A lot of, certainly over here in the UK, a lot of small business owners will, I know we all work from home at the moment, but work from home, service-based, are very good at what they do, but don't necessarily have any formal business education or learning. Anyone can start a business. And there are lots of things that they know they should know, but they don't. And we certainly have had a culture, I think, in this country of being scared of putting your hand up and asking for help at school. If you're in the classroom, the teacher asks a question, you put your hand up to answer it, and one of two things happens. The teacher either says, "Why can't you keep up?" Okay, or your friends bully you because you're the class swot. So you learn very quickly to keep your hand down. Yeah. And not ask stupid questions. Right. And I think that stays with us. I mean, there is no such thing as a stupid question, but to you, the perception is that. Right. So what we've now tried to do is create an environment where a psychologically safe environment where people can ask the daft questions. People can get support from each other, their peers, and learn from each other's mistakes, learn from each other's successes, and ask the questions in any other environment they wouldn't be able to ask. I think the other thing is that we're providing somewhere where we've got specific solutions to problems they're having, so they don't have enough time. Well, okay, we teach them how to manage their diary properly. They don't know how to get more customers. So we teach them how to market effectively. They're not very good at selling, because who gets taught how to sell? And everybody has that fear of the second-hand, car lot salesman type thing, and they're all a little bit, and so we get them get over that. They don't value themselves, so therefore they undercharge. So therefore you end up doing far more work than you have time for and not earning any money, So it's helping people with those kind of mindset challenges, if you like, confidence, and we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun for each other. That's one of the most important things I learned, is that you're going to run a business. It's difficult, so where you can, have some fun.
Sure.
You should enjoy it. It's like sport. I watch a lot of football. You call it soccer. It's wrong, but proper football. There's nothing greater than seeing a footballer or a professional sportsman smile while he's playing his sport.
Yeah.
Isn't that why we do it?
Yeah. There was, you probably didn't see it, but there was a highlight from American football where the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, you could see it so clearly as he's looking downfield. And that moment he sees that his wide receiver is going to be open for a touchdown, he smiles right before he throws the ball. And it was like this moment of joy that you sometimes don't see in the sometimes so serious world of professional sports. That was
it's so highly paid. There's so much money involved. There's so much pressure and sponsors and stuff. It's get to players, and I think business is the same. It's so competitive. People have this perception of, I don't want to fail. I don't want to let my family down. How do I go back to my mates who will just say to me, "Oh, I told you so." Your wife's saying, "Why don't you get a proper job?" Your mum's saying, "Well, we finally, you finally come to your senses and doing something sensible." And it's that pride thing, isn't it? And I think we can create an environment where you can share those issues. It's a pretty cool thing. We're really proud of what we've built.
Well, that's great. And I love that you bring up the phrase psychological safety, because back to what you were mentioning earlier, that's something that aviation has created in that cockpit environment, that team environment. The safety to speak up. Many hospitals are still very much struggling, as you were saying, breaking down that hierarchical, authoritarian culture, and creating that psychological safety leads to patient safety.
Completely. If the people who are doing the work, who are in charge of you, don't feel they can speak up, that's dangerous, because they don't, sometimes the people who are closest to it don't see the dangers.
Yeah. So final thing I want to ask you about, a different way of speaking up is writing a book. And so you've got a lot to say. Hitting the wall, now that I know about your tennis background, I'm guessing there's a double meaning there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole book with you, but we came up with this idea of using the wall as an anchor. And the wall is a very specific wall in London, where I grew up, where I learned to play against this wall. And it was the wall that made up the clubhouse, because I couldn't afford to join the club, but I could hit balls against the clubhouse wall. Oh. And it's kind of my journey from that wall, and relating it to the walls we all have in front of us, the barriers that we all kind of have to deal with as business owners and as people, and how to go around them, break through them, go under them, bypass them. And there have been a number of sort of pivotal instances in my life that we've used as kind of anchor lessons to dig into some of those ways and lessons of getting past that wall, or those walls, if you like. So it was a lot of fun writing it. And I learned a lot about myself, which was great, and I had a lot of help. But it's been a really good journey. I've really enjoyed putting it together, and I think it's in some ways it's been quite cathartic. You realize that you're carrying stuff from your past, and when you actually get it out and you analyze it and you write it and you go, well, what are the lessons? And you realize you're not just sharing those lessons with other people, but you're reminding yourself that those lessons are true for you as well. Yeah. And I think that I've spoken to a few people who have, authored books recently, and they've said similar things, that actually when they sort of distill down the stuff they're going through and they've been through in the past and they lay it bare, it's very cathartic. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's a big accomplishment. I've written a couple of books, and
I've seen,
so congratulations for that. Many people start a book. It's a smaller subset like yourself who finish the book and have it ready to go to print. Was one other question. Did you feel like there were any mistakes in the writing process? I mean, beyond like, a typo, but it's something you learned about the writing process that surprised you.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said, I mean, I think I've tried to write this book 3 times, and you got some help with somebody. Again, maybe this is a learning. I've had coaches all my life, so I found myself a book coach who helped me through it, and it made a massive difference. And yes, there are errors in the book. I think as we grow and we learn things about ourselves, I'd probably write a different book today than the one I started 3 months ago. And in 3 months' time, it'll be slightly different. So yeah, there's definitely things in it that potentially will be a version 2 or a different option. And also, I think as we were writing, we go, oh, there's a book there around that chapter. I think that's what comes out.
Yeah, but that, I thank you for sharing that you used a book coach. I used a book coach with the last book that I wrote, and I found that to be a very helpful experience. And everybody could use a coach. I think is definitely a theme that I hear from many of the guests on this show.
Yeah, it would be daft of me to advocate the power of coaching and not have coaches in my own life. And I think, I've been around coaches, whether I wanted them or not, since I was about 13. And my life has massively benefited from having somebody who's around me, or people's around me. I'm a big believer in the power of mastermind as well, and having peer groups and having people challenging you and not letting you rest on your laurels and enabling you to be a better version of yourself is a really cool thing. It's a really powerful thing. So, but I can't sort of promote that without using it. It seems crazy. I wouldn't be without one.
Right. Well, Ash, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. Our guest again has been Ash Taylor. I'll make sure there are links in the show notes for the podcast and for the video. The book, again, is Hitting the Wall. It should be available in November. Ash's website, amongst other websites, ash.taylor.co.uk. So with that, again, Ash, thank you so much for being here, and really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been great fun.
Good thing. And again, congratulations and good luck with the next phase of the book now, the book launch. So
the book launch, yeah, that'll be the fun bit. I'm sure we'll make some mistakes there as well.
Well, I'm sure you'll learn from them, so that's all right.
Yeah.
Thanks again.